recording and start it. Okay. Really don't like the Windows 11 setup. I can't make these windows the right size. Okay, anyway, so we're talking about browser games. These are obviously games that are played in the browser. And this is a relatively new phenomenon because, web browsers, when they first were created, were a more simplified technology that was used specifically just for text and eventually added images and styling and then scripting. And when scripting was added, you could create games because obviously games require interactivity beyond just basic HTML links and things like that. Browser games first sort of started to exist in the mid to late 90s, and Flash was kind of the big original platform that a lot of browser games were designed in. And it was a sort of plugin that would kind of fit into the web page. So it wasn't like text or an image or something like that. It was actually interactive. And it used a language called ActionScript, which is kind of similar to the scripting that we've been doing in class. It has a lot of the same sort of like concepts and ideas that are going on. And so once you could create Flash games, it became very popular, and a lot of people were making Flash games for different sites and for different applications and things like that. And that's actually kind of where I got my start as a game developer and web developer in general. That's the first projects that I made were in Flash, and the first job that I had when I was younger was working on Flash-based games. One of the first websites that became kind of popular during this early period was the site Newgrounds, which still exists. Over here, I have to do this capture thing. And so you can kind of see it actually looks pretty similar to how it looked like when it first came out a long time ago. People can publish games, and anyone who wants to can publish a game on here, and they kind of sort them. So this was pretty exciting for me as a kid, and for a lot of people who wanted to create games and be able to publish them and have other people play them, and you can comment them and rate them and stuff like that. And so there's a lot of websites like this where there would be like competitions, and this led to a lot of like game jams and people creating work collectively online and stuff like that. And so it's a pretty cool community and world that exists. And one of the first sort of like viral games that was ever created was this game called Club a Seal. This was sort of like a joke game. Let me open this in a different tab. Okay, so it's saying that the doesn't exist. Let's see if we can find an archived version. So yeah, you can see with Flash, a lot of these games don't exist anymore. Even if you have, like, I have this built-in Flash emulator in my browser, so that probably wouldn't even like show up if I was on an old browser. But let's grab a snapshot. So let's see. Wow, this goes back pretty far. Let's just go to 2008. Looked like there was a lot going on then. Pick one of these. See if we can get to run. Okay, yeah. So this is sort of a satirical game. You don't really like do anything. You just like hit seals. It's sort of like edgy humor or whatever. It's supposed to be kind of funny. And it's really goofy. Obviously it's the kind of thing that would only be popular on sort of like a joke game website. Let's see if this actually works. It probably won't. Okay, yeah. Still kind of works. The sound isn't working. It's like downloading the sound files. But anyway, it's sort of a, it's sort of a satirical game. It's meant to be kind of like edgy humor. It's very like early internet. But it was really, really popular, and it was kind of interesting because like such a goofy game became kind of this like important, or I don't know about important, but significant, cultural event. So that was kind of like one of the, that sort of led to lots of other people creating browser games that were very simplified, kind of making these jokes. Another really popular title by the same developer was this game, Alien Hominid. This is another like viral game that has more kind of typical game mechanics. And it's actually running on the original page. And so you can see it uses site. Okay. So it kind of uses like goofy hand drawings. It uses a lot of the same mechanics that are popular in platformer style games. I actually don't know what the buttons are, so I'm not really playing this very well. Let me see. Button. Jump. Okay. For some reason. Oh, there we go. Anyway, it has kind of goofy animations, but it works pretty well. I like that, that you can see the hand-drawn style. It's kind of like graphic. It uses this kind of comic book style. So it's something that, I don't know how many people worked on this. There's probably not many. It's 1, 2, 3 people, the art, the programming, and the music. And it's very simple, but it works. It has like a good style, and it was a really popular game. It's fun to just like run around and shoot stuff and try to jump, and it's pretty hard. I haven't played this in a while, probably since the last time we looked at it in here. But it's actually pretty challenging, and there's a decent amount of levels and stuff like that. It's a pretty fun game. But there's a lot of games that kind of look like this, and these types of games that were really popular kind of would always inspire lots of people to create similar games. Another popular title, this one is maybe one that you guys have actually heard of, is Meat Boy, which has a bunch of like sequels, Super Meat Boy and stuff like that. This one has some similar game mechanics. I keep clicking on this. But it has, again, kind of like goofy cartoon graphics, really, really simplified. Not exactly pixel graphics, but kind of in that style, kind of this like flat, simple style. The main character is basically just like a box. And there's some cutscenes. They're really, really simple. They're just kind of these basic images. I still have the site muted. I think there's probably audio. But then this one has really kind of like interesting mechanics where there's this sort of like, it's hard to explain, but you just have like a lot more sort of like leeway to move in the air. So I can like jump up and then move far right and left. And so this is kind of like a basic 2D platformer, but it's playing with mechanics in an interesting way. It's also pretty graphic. You can see all these like blood spots that the main character, which is the Meat Boy, is like the trail is leading everywhere. And it's this very simple game. You can see the tile sets are really simple. There's a thing over there that I get. Uh-oh, I'm gonna die. But sort of similar to like the indie game movement, which is certainly a part of, these browser specific games had to be very small. So you needed a small tile set of images, a small sort of like program, like code base, and then simple level descriptions and stuff like that to be able to download and run in Flash. and run pretty smoothly, which this does. It's pretty easy to play. And so that's where a lot of the conventions that we see in current browser-based games, because even though our browsers are much faster, we can run 3D and do all this other crazy stuff with them. There's still some limitations. There's still more limitations than what we would get from a standalone application. And when we export our games later in the semester, we'll see there's a little bit of a performance difference between the builds that you make for Windows or Mac versus the builds that you make for the web. So other browser style games, a lot of casual games. So Bejeweled is a really, really popular game that started in the browser. It's mostly probably played on the phone these days, but it was first started in the web, and it was also using Flash. And a lot of these kind of casual games would be on the homepage of like your email website, like yahoo.com or something like that. And so they kind of like broadened the client base, or the sort of like type of person who were playing video games, especially online. So some more recent browser-based games. There's a developer called Mallindustria that makes more politically themed games. This McDonald's, the game, is a good example of one of their games. And this developer has created a lot of tools that make it easier to make games in the browser. I used to actually teach this class using his tools instead of Godot. But Godot has, come along, and they have a lot of good exporting tools. So they're actually pretty similar in the way they think about games, Godot and the Mallindustria engine. But yeah, they have kind of this one, you have to write the code and build everything from scratch, whereas Godot has kind of the built-in stuff. But let's find that the McDonald's video game. Let's see.
Quality, service, cleanliness, and value. Quality, service, cleanliness, and value.
Okay, so I'm going to mute that. So this one is kind of a satirical simulation game. So you can, but it's sort of like pointing out the similarities between simulation games and like running this like big corporation. And it's kind of pointing out some of the various like moral and ethical issues that go into the decisions that you have to make to be successful as a huge food company. And so you can see kind of the different systems that you're in charge of, and it's looks very much like any type of like Overcooked or any type of food simulation game you might have played, but you also get to play as the board and business side of the game as well. And you can see there's a lot of games on this site. They're all browser-based games. There's a lot of really good ones. That McDonald's one was one of the more sort of like popular ones that made a big splash. But you can see there's a lot of other games. A lot of them have political or satirical ideas behind them, but not all of them do. So I definitely recommend checking out more of his work. Okay. So in 2007, the iPhone was released, and they did not support Flash. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Some of them are economic and political. But it really changed, what the expectation was for that, because basically tons and tons of websites that ran on Flash just didn't work on the iPhone. And when the iPhone first came out in 2007, most people didn't use it the way that we do now, where, we do almost everything on our phones. But it did make it clear to Adobe and people who were working in Flash that if Flash was never going to be supported on the iPhone, then eventually something else would have to replace it. And so in some ways this was bad, because a lot of the games from this era got lost, although we can see that a lot of them are still playable through these emulators. But it was also good because it kind of inspired people to find better tools on the web for creating graphics and interactions. And HTML5 came out in 2014, which kind of took a lot of the functionality and possibilities of Flash and put them into the HTML canvas, which is when we export from Godot, that's what it uses to actually publish the work. And I do a lot of stuff on my own with the HTML canvas. It's very powerful, and most of my work is web-based, so I'm very familiar with that platform. And this led to a lot of, there was sort of this lull where people couldn't create Flash games anymore, but it also led to a lot of HTML and JavaScript based games, which in some cases have, better functionality, and, are more likely to be something that's open source that you can build upon, because HTML and JavaScript are open technologies that we can look at in the browser. So a few examples of some games that are from this new period of HTML and JavaScript based games. I'm pretty sure this one doesn't work anymore. Oh yeah, I have a video here. So one thing that did is it kind of opened up the possibilities to use APIs in JavaScript. So you could this is using the Google Maps API to take a portion of a map and then render it in 3D on a cube, and it turns it into one of those games where you're moving the marble around and you have to get it across the streets and stuff like that. So this is plugging into data that existed on the web, these Google Map data, and then using it as the source for a game. So there's a lot of new projects like this because we were, using HTML and JavaScript instead of doing stuff in Flash, which was just this kind of box that wasn't connected to everything else. Other kind of like simple games. This is a JavaScript and HTML game. It doesn't have any like multimedia or anything like that, but it's a pretty good example of the other types of games that came out of this renewed focus on HTML and JavaScript. And so in this game, this is sort of like a resource management game, but you basically just have to wait until you collect all these candies, and eventually you can do stuff with them. If you eat the candies, then you don't have them anymore, and it's sort of a joke kind of game, but it actually there's a lot of stuff that goes into it, and it becomes kind of complex if you kind of wait long enough and play it. Let's see if we can request a new feature. Okay, so we have a status bar, configuration tab. Let's see. The candies. Forget what happens. Obviously, we don't have time to actually play through this whole thing, but it's pretty. There's a lot more to it than it looks like at first. Another popular game from that time. This is also a popular iOS game now. Is a Darkroom. Let's not use the audio. Where it's sort of like this like big complex RPG that also has resource management components to it, where there's a sort of narrative and you have these options, and those options kind of change, and you can explore this world, and it gets much more complex. But it's not using anything other than HTML and JavaScript, and probably some CSS. So that's another really good browser game. Another good example of what you can take advantage of on the web is communities. So this is just an example. There's a million games like this, but this is a cool example of a game where people can create their own levels. So it kind of reminds us a little bit of that game ZZT that we talked about in the indie games lecture. But that one was distributed, physically. Or not physically, but it was distributed on the internet, but you needed to like download it and edit it and upload it to a forum. It didn't have like a platform where you could do all of that stuff. So you had to be pretty technical to be able to do this. Whereas on a video game like this, you can pretty much anybody. You don't really have to be technical or be able to understand the structure of the code or do anything like that. You can pretty much just like start drawing and create like a new game to play. This is not going to be a very good one, but see, where do I put? Oh, you can have new vehicles now. Did this in a while. Where do I? Maybe I just start driving. Oh yeah, I can just start going. Yeah, so I can draw these levels, and the game just kind of like runs, and then I can share this and I can play other people's games. So that's another thing that happens on the web, is you can have these communities where people are contributing to a game world. Let's play an existing game.
Dr. Michael Morbius, half the city wants to kill you.
I used to be pretty good at this game. I'm not that good anymore. I haven't been playing it. Anyway, that's a pretty fun one, and there's a lot of games like that. Another game kind of similar to this, you guys have probably seen, maybe not this specific game, but games in this style, Agar.io, and this was the first of this style of game that was using the HTML canvas and just JavaScript, but then also networking. So this is a game where I just kind of eat the little dots and I get bigger and bigger, and if somebody eats me, I lose. And if I eat somebody else, you know, they lose. And there's a lot of games that kind of took this basic blueprint and you know, developed other types of games with it. There's like whole like websites that are just like hundreds of these different style games, but this was kind of the original idea for this game. Gotta stay away from that person. I think I can hide in here. Not that I really. Okay, let's see if I can eat this person. They're getting bigger than me. We're almost like the same size. Oh, but maybe I can force. Uh-oh. Okay. Okay, I got eaten. Anyway, so those are just a few examples of the different styles of web games that have become popular since Flash kind of went away and HTML and JavaScript took over. Oh yeah, Snake.io. Yeah, there's a lot of them. There's one that I like called like Narwhal.io, I think. So it's like basically the same thing, but when I click, it makes me kind of like shoot forward. There's nobody in here though. Yeah, the problem with these games is once they're not popular anymore, there's not enough people in here to play them. Anyway, there's a lot of those kind of games. So for HTML5 and JavaScript, you had to actually like write code and design stuff and put your game together. But a lot of the new platforms, Godot and Unity in particular, make it possible to make HTML5 based games and put them on the web. So itch.io is one of many places where you can find games like this. We could probably actually check for, if we look for tags, we can see just Godot based game. Yeah, so we can see games that are made in Godot, I assume, if they're tagged Godot. And we can say the itch also has like Mac and Windows based games, but we can say web games only. We can say, you know, top rated, and look at all these different games on here. And there's tons and tons of games on itch, and this is where we will eventually publish our games. And itch is, you know, there's a lot of other services that do kind of similar things. I, you know, randomly just kind of started using itch a while ago for this class, not for any particular reason, but there's a lot of stuff on here, and there's the, you know, the interface is good, the tools are good. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff on here to check out, and we will eventually publish our own games on here. You know, once we get to the end of the semester. And there's also like game jams and stuff like that. Like if we go to the jams section, you can see this whole kind of calendar of all these different game jams that are happening. There is a Godot jam at some point during the year, but I kind of forget. Let's see if we can. So these are from the last Godot jam, but these are just games. Let's see. there's like a browse. Yeah, I'll look for it later and maybe share it. But you can see all these different game jams that are happening. This is a good way to meet people who are making games and create your own games and spend some time working on a game either over a month or a week or a weekend or something like that. So yeah. Where else play Tanks? I don't remember Tanks. Is that a web game?
Yeah, it was on Newgrounds, but like you could also download it for a while.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it like some I played it so often, but like my boyfriend also is like, I have no idea what you're talking about, but you just like move them back and forth on different terrains and shoot it. Excuse me, and shoot at each other.
Oh, okay. Is maybe it's this. It's not launching. I'm not sure. So yeah, maybe I'd have to download this. Although it was letting me launch other stuff. Maybe this is. Oh, this is a Unity game. So this is probably. But yeah, it sounds vaguely familiar. I'll see if I can download this. Okay, cool. So that's our little history of browser games, and we'll be contributing to the browser game world by the end of the semester. Okay, I'm gonna